Welcome, guys, to the fifth episode of the SMEEA Podcast. My name is Jose Rodriguez, your third vice president. Today, we are going to be joined by Leslie Hu, the coordinator of community schools at San Francisco Unified School District. Leslie is going to help us today better understand the underlying principles of community schools and give us some insight into how the program works in San Francisco. But before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. You can find these interviews on YouTube, where we hope you will like and subscribe. But the audio versions of these interviews are also available wherever you listen to podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Overcast, wherever. We hope that you will find these interviews informative and enjoyable. With that, guys, let's go ahead and get started. I'm so excited to talk to Leslie. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining us here. We are with Leslie Hu, the coordinator of community schools at San Francisco Unified School District. Thank you for joining us, Leslie.
Yeah, no, anytime. Thank you for having me. So technically I'm not the director of community schools. That's a management position, but I serve centrally supporting the community schools initiative. So that's my boss. And so I sort of how I got here was I actually spent the first 8 years of my career as a school social worker, really doing, culture climate stuff and social emotional stuff, mental health stuff at school sites. And that's where my heart is, and I loved it. And also I was starting to burn out a little bit, being sort of like the holder of like the trauma of all the students. And so there was like that part, but actually the bigger part of it actually was that I wanted to have more of a wider impact on the entire school experience and the experience of young people at schools rather than just a sliver of it. And so I started kind of thinking about like kind of broadening things, but I was like really staunchly against like being an admin. Like that's not my route and that's not my path. And so I learned about community schools. And so I became a community school coordinator in 2015 at a middle school here in San Francisco, and I served in that role for 7 years. And then I went on to be the United Educators of San Francisco secretary, and I was on release for 2 years to kind of do some organizing around community schools. And so we were able to like do a lot of really cool stuff with that in those 2 years. And now I'm back in the district full time working centrally supporting community schools, more like a coach than anything.
Wow, okay, so you've been doing this work before we had community
Yeah.
schools.
Yeah,
That's
I started doing this in 2015.
nice. Okay, so before community schools came along, you were just in a traditional public school setting.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So then from your vantage point, your experience, can you maybe explain to us how are community schools different than a traditional public school setting?
Yeah, so I'll kind of explain some of the more easier to understand parts of community schools, and that is sort of like the more wraparound service type of stuff, right? Like we know that when our young people come into our classrooms, they come in with hella stuff with them, right? Like they come in with, they're food insecure. They might be like experiencing housing insecurity. They don't know where they're going to sleep this next night. Maybe they're newly immigrant and new to the country. Whatever those kind of like life experiences are, they come into the school building with that, right? And so like providing services to address those, right? Like providing mental health, having after school programs, having food pantries, maybe actually having, cards that parents can use for public transportation. Like all of these things are to address sort of like the basic needs of a young person and family, right? Like that's a part of community schools, right? Is this basically have like a community center at a school site, right? To have it be a hub of the community, right? To like provide all these different types of services, right? We've heard community schools that have like a food pantry, a dental clinic, a health clinic, all of these kind of things. These are like sort of the easier to understand about like a community school where it kind of really serves the whole community and kind of thinks about our young people more as like it's more of a whole child perspective rather than they're just students. They're actually humans with needs and desires and all that kind of stuff. So that's one part of community schools. But the other part of community schools that we know that in my mind is a lot more transformational actually is the shared decision making, right? So community schools are schools that belong to community, right? Like, and that's an interesting concept that we don't often think about. We think about schools as a place where kids come to us, we teach them, and they are the recipients of all this knowledge and they learn and grow and thrive. But how do we do that? And we actually are, it comes from this like a little bit of a mindset of that schools belong to them. They belong to their like in order for them to thrive and grow, like these schools have to feel like they belong to them. And they have to feel like they belong to their families, and they have to feel like they belong to educators, right? So it's not just young people, it's their families, it's the educators and the community that serves them, right? Is that so when we do that, right, it actually flips the script and it flips the hierarchy that traditionally happens at schools, right? We all have experienced that whole like, okay, the principal just makes decisions for all of it. And I'm like, no shade on the principal. I mean, some of them, yes, but the principal is just one person. It's just one brain. But we're talking about how do you harness the collective wisdom of everybody in the building, right? We know that young people, whether you're 7 years old or 17 years old, know exactly what they need to thrive and grow. 7 year olds may not be able to articulate it, but the 7 year olds who are like, pacing around the classroom, they're trying to tell you something. They're trying to tell you they got ants in the pants and they can't concentrate right now and they need a fidget or they need to like drink some water or maybe they're hungry, like that. So maybe they can't say it with their words, but they're saying it with their actions, right? And with 17-year-olds, they're more able, not all of them, but more able to articulate what they need to thrive and grow, right? And how do we actually put them in the forefront of like, they're the experts of their own experience in their own lives, and the families are the experts on their own families, and educators are experts on educating. How do we actually have them at the forefront leading the school? It's actually just unionism in public schools, right? It's like all we strive for. We want a voice at the table. We're not saying that we're the smartest, most brilliant people, but we're saying that when we all come together and make decisions together, that's where the rich and depth comes from. And that's how schools actually grow, is that we work in lockstep together, right? And so those are some of the biggest differences I see in community schools and in traditional schools. Community schools have things like more traditional, like after school programs, more counselors, because they address the whole child, maybe nutrition programs, maybe physical health stuff, all these kind of things that we, like, if we're to say like 20, 30 years ago, that's not what a traditional public school is, right? We rely on the wisdom of our young people, right? Like we know that they are super wise and we don't listen enough, right? And when I say we, I mean the system of we. So these are some of the biggest differences between like a non-community school and a community school.
Thank you for explaining it like that. I like that you explained it in a way that, to my mind, I was thinking, oh yeah, we're addressing kind of those, lower level Maslow kind of
Yes.
needs. And then at
Yes.
the same time, this I don't even know if it's like inverting the power pyramid so much as like turning it into a more collaborative
Well,
cycle or
it's
circle,
more like flattening.
flattening.
Instead of
Yeah,
like a triangle, it's flattening it so that everybody has a voice. And I'm not saying it's like equality so much as that we all have to acknowledge and recognize that that we all bring wisdom to the table and we should create a table that's inclusive of everybody in that school community, right? And we want to be especially mindful of, our newly immigrant young people, our LGBTQ kids and families, like all these people who have been systemically oppressed and been silenced. We want it to be inclusive of everybody.
exactly. And so thank you for kind of explaining the differences there. And then you're in San Francisco and you're at
Yeah.
a community school.
Yes.
What does it look like? What's an average day perhaps look like at your community school?
Yeah, so I worked at MLK Middle School in San Francisco, and I can say, like, here's what it looked like in our school. So inside the classroom, we did project-based learning, which lent itself really well to community schooling because project-based learning, there's some really big pillars in project-based learning, one of which is like authentic learning and authentic, like connecting it to real world experiences. So, for example, you would do projects on, say, I've been part of, projects where kids they chose the topic where they were talking about the unhoused community members in their neighborhood. And the topic that they were honing in on was how do they keep warm at night? And so they designed all these projects around how to help keep them warm. And it was within their science classes. They worked it in their ELA classes. We brought in engineers from the community to come and talk to them. We brought city leaders, the city supervisor, city council members to come in talking about the unhoused population inside that neighborhood. So we were able to kind of connect that to like an authentic real world experience. And then they showcase that project, which is like connecting to like an authentic audience, right? And so that was one way that we were able to do that community schooling because community schooling is like, really strong community partnerships. So my job in some ways was to actually bring in families to be part of that authentic audience to harness their expertise, right? So maybe like, we have a family member who is an engineer, or maybe a family member who was like a formerly unhoused person and they could come in. There's all these ways that they were able to come in, right? And so that was part of what I did as a coordinator was I could impact what was happening inside the classrooms in those specific ways, right? As to help actually like advance the academic growth of young people while still being able to like bring in community partners, bring in our families and kind of like wrap around in that way around an academic endeavor, right? So that is like one like thing that I don't think we think a lot about community schools is that we were able to really, I focus actually mostly on instruction. Actually, I spent the vast majority of my time supporting instruction inside the classrooms. We also piloted like a math intervention program, and that came from me sitting in all these really boring math department meetings. Not that the people were boring, but I'm not a math teacher. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I spent all this time reading scope and sequences and standards, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm reading, and I had to learn a lot. But then because of that, I was able to understand what they were talking about, and we were able to like dream and come up with a pilot where we worked with our after school program and our math teachers to co-teach an intervention class. And we brought in families, we brought in case managers to actually wrap around those kids around that pilot, right? And so we were able to do those kind of like academic things, but we were also able to have a full scope dental clinic. We were addressing a need, which was that in our zip code, in the zip code that my school was in, where most of our families were from, we had only one pediatric dentist in the entire zip code. We had only like two or three dentists in the entire zip code that served people at all. And so we were able to address that need and have that clinic. So that's something a little bit more classic community schools. So we were able to do those things. We were also really intentional about shared leadership, right? And so I was a normal kind of like, rank and file union member, like at a school side, like a classroom teacher, or as a paraeducator. And my principal and I and the team, we really worked to have, all these ways in which teachers and young people and families were leading the charge, right? So we had teacher-led professional development. 100% of our professional development was led by teachers. 100% of our grade level time, department time was all led by teachers. It was teacher created, right? He, in fact, of all the meetings that we had, he only facilitated the staff meeting. Right. And so that was one way that we had shared leadership with educators, was because educators were leading the charge. Educators were making decisions that were school-wide, right? And then we were able to have a really strong, robust, in San Francisco, we have this program called Peer Resources. It's like a student leadership class, right? And those young people led the charge around all sorts of stuff, right? Like we implemented a bathroom policy because, middle schoolers, they're like vaping in the bathrooms. And so they were the ones who were leading the charge and changing that policy, like that kind of stuff, So we were really, really intentional about creating the conditions for young people, for educators, for families to show up in leadership and actually lead the school with their expertise. And so those were like some concrete ways that showed up in our school, but it shows up in different ways at other schools. We have a school here in San Francisco that has the only one in the United States of a shelter on campus for unhoused students and families. So, and that came from a hopes and needs assessment. We call it hopes and needs assessment. They came from a needs assessment that they did at their school site, which is a critical feature of community schools, is really understanding the needs of the community. And they were like I think it was like a quarter of the students and families were unhoused in that school. And so they made it like it was a parent-driven effort to like have now a functioning shelter for over 60, 80 families at a time on campus. And it's been running for no, it was before the pandemic, 2017, 2018. Since then, and it's helped hundreds of families get them off the street, but also into stable housing, right? It's just revolutionized the way that we've done public school in San Francisco. So it has been a really innovative and transformational aspect of our schooling. And it's not at every single school. Like I'm talking about two schools that are like standouts, obviously, but that's sort of like the gold standard. That's what we are aspiring to be. And we can see it. We can see it right there. And that's what we're working towards.
I have not heard that example. That is crazy, like crazy awesome.
Crazy
Crazy
awesome,
awesome.
right? So awesome.
I love that. So you've kind of already mentioned this in some of your responses, but maybe we can just be intentional with
Mhm.
this question. So hearing all this, what are the driving principles of community schools? Like what are the underlying principles? What are the driving principles of
Yeah.
this program?
I think that's a really good um question. And so these are the things that come up for me, like why I'm so passionate about it and how like I mean, I just don't see myself devoting myself to the rest of my career. I see myself devoting the rest of my career to this work. And it's because I do value like certain things about community schools. It operationalizes a couple of different like really core values that I have, which one of which is that schools have to belong to community, right? Like, in order for us to have strong public education systems, the old way of doing things has to be thrown out. This hierarchical sage on the stage, pretending that like one person knows all the answers kind of stuff is not the way to go. Like, so I really just believe that schools have to belong to community. And how we do that, one of the ways that we do that is that they have to be drivers of this work. They have to be the leaders and decision makers of this work, right? We have to value educators and the incredible expertise that we bring to the table. We have to value young people, and that we have to have this is also a core belief of mine too, is that I really do believe young people, even though, let's be real, sometimes they're all over the place, right? And they're just like kind of like, like I have this joke. I worked in middle school for most of my career that like sometimes I just don't know, like, did you, like I'm amazed that they put on two shoes on and came to school. So sometimes there's that, right? But I do believe with all my heart, right, that they actually, young people have a really, really strong sense of what they need to thrive and grow. Like they may not be able to articulate it, but we as adults, it's a part of our jobs to interpret those behaviors, right? Like I think about the kiddo who's like just pacing around the room, right? Who's got ants in the pants. Partially it's because that's information for us as an adult, right? Like they're feeling antsy, they've got like maybe some sensory issues, they're hungry, they need to use the bathroom, whatever those things are, right? But they're saying something to us, right? And so I just really believe that if we believe that and we believe that families are their best experts on their children, and I have that caveat is that sometimes we see we can all think of times where there's been a parent that we're like, whoa, right? And I also really want to recognize that it's always the vast, vast, vast minority. It might be one in hundreds, right? But that the vast majority of parents are the experts and care so deeply about our children, right? Why not be allies? Why not work together as a team, right? So that's another value that I have. I also have a little bit of anarchist in me, which is probably why I'm kind of like a hardcore unionist, is that I just really believe in that the solutions belong with the people, right? Like the people who are on the ground every single day. Like You, Jose, like you're filming this from your classroom. I'm in, like an office, right? But like the people who are in those classrooms, you all are know exactly what's up. You just do, right? And I think those people who are closest to the problem should be closest to the power and to the solutions, right? And so I just really believe in the power of those on the ground doing the hard work every day. I sit in a cubicle every day. Like I'm not the one, right? But you all are the one. The educators on the ground are the ones. Yes, the young people are the ones. I mean, I really do believe young people are going to save us, right, from fascism. So I'm just like sitting here and being like, yo, save us because we need it now. Right. So I just really believe in that. Right. Yeah, exactly. Time. Like today, last week, people's 401ks are at stake. So I just really think that like these are some of like the really important values for me. I also just really like being aligned with each other, that we all should be rowing in the same boat and that we have to just have the hard conversations to get to there. And I just think that that's really missing from sort of like the way that we do school normally. Like I talk to everybody. Most of the educators I know, they have principals who design all the professional learning. And guess what? Sometimes they really suck. But guess what would happen if you had the teachers in that school right now who are like, I'm on the ground. I'm talking to my homie down the hall. What we need to do? I need to learn more about this. I need to plan and co-plan with my partner teachers on this. I need to work with my other third grade teachers on this, right? Like educators know, right? And so I just see the community schools operationalizing those values and principles of this public education. And that's how I see it showing up in community schools.
Wow. By the way, Leslie, I love your passion. I'm sitting here. I'm like, yes, let's go. Let's get started.
Yeah, hell yes.
Thank you. So as we wrap up here, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah,
Um, as we wrap up, what advice would you give our association, give our members, as we start to make community schools a reality here in
yeah.
SMBSD?
Totally. So I think one of the things is to talk to people. I know Anaheim, ASTA, Anaheim Secondary Teachers Association, they have an opportunity to get paid to go and visit some of their schools. So that could be something is to like talk to other folks who have community schools. I am happy to set up a Zoom for our community school coordinator, the one who has the unhoused the shelter at their school site, like to like just do that, just to understand more. But if you're all like, hell yes, I'm ready to go, I would say the first step actually is to really start to develop a steering committee for your school district, to have that maybe in your contract, because here's my thing is that like school districts might have a really hard time kind of making it a reality. And sometimes our school districts have I'm going to blame it on one specific problem, which is turnover. When you have like these superintendents that are different, assistant superintendents, board members, all these people kind of rotate. The only lasting thing sometimes are these pieces of paper, these documents that have teeth and strength. So that's why I actually really could recommend that if you all have a community schools resolution, that's awesome. If you can put it into your contract and your next bargaining, then that has teeth. Because let me tell you, some of the most powerful pieces of paper in any school district is your contract. It is the most powerful piece of paper usually in every, and the most, but that's not the only thing. The most powerful force is usually educators. It's your union, right? So I think that that's one pathway, but having a steering committee to have people come together, parents, young people, educators, community, central office admin, coming together to kind of think about what you want this to look like in your district, I actually think is a great place to start, is to start there and have it trickle downwards, right? But I also think at school sites, having people understand what this is, go visit neighboring districts who are, maybe have a community school that they can talk to who've been doing this for a few more years. But I think having like building that shared and deep understanding is a really good first step. And then like memorializing that in policy is also another good step.
That's awesome. Thank you. I went to the community schools strand or whatever you
Yep.
call it
Yep.
2 summers ago at UCLA.
Yeah.
and we
And
were
that's
able to
another,
go. We were able
yeah.
to go visit one of the sessions was on the contract part of it.
Love it, love it. I mean, I think the other thing is like to use CTA. Like CTA has these regional meetings where you can actually meet with other locals who are trying to like push this forward. So I don't know what region y'all are in. I'm in region one, region three. So I think Aisha is region three, and so she holds monthly Zoom meetings for locals to like talk it through, bounce ideas off each other, get some resources. So that can be another place for you all to just like tinker with some plans and ideas.
Yeah, we have a community schools team in our union, and we have people who attend that with
Yeah.
Aisha, and she's
Yeah,
awesome
and if
as
there's
well.
yeah, she's great. And if there's any like money and you all want to come up to San Francisco, like let's try and do that. I would love to take you around and get the best burritos ever. But also visit some schools and talk to some other educators. I'm happy to do that too. But that can also happen in, schools more in your area that might not take as much money. But yeah, I mean, we're all here to support one another. And so I'm also happy to like hop on a call with y'all, talk it through you know. But yeah, I just think that there's a lot to think about for you all. And I think I really appreciate this time that y'all are taking just to learn more. That's like so critical before jumping into like a thing. But I really do believe that it's basically unionism in schools. It's like shared decision making. It's like people coming together to make a decision together, acting together in the best interest of our young people and families.
Absolutely, I 1000% agree, and I hope that you and I can keep in touch and
Yeah,
definitely. You mentioned earlier you're happy to hop on a Zoom with our e-board,
totally.
so that'd be
Yes,
great.
absolutely. I would love to meet your e-board. I'd love to talk. Yeah,
Yay.
absolutely. Heck yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Leslie.
Thank you so
I
much.
appreciate you so
Appreciate
much.
you and appreciate you all, your entire executive board, and hope you all have a really good rest of the school year.
Oh, same. We're almost there. It's like 40 days.
You know exactly. Love it.
Thank you, Leslie, and I'll be in touch. All right.
Thank you so much.
All
Talk to
right.
you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right, it was such a pleasure to be able to speak with Leslie today. She is so incredibly knowledgeable and passionate, very energetic, very humorous. I enjoyed my time with her talking about community schools, and I hope that you all enjoyed this episode as well. We definitely can use some of her energy, her passion, her knowledge as we get this community schools ball rolling in SMBSD. All right, guys, with that, I hope that you will continue to tune in to our podcast, both on YouTube and wherever you happen to listen to podcasts, so that you can continue to learn more about community schools, among other issues affecting us locally, at the state level, and of course, nationally. And please do us a huge favor by liking this video or leaving us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your continued support. And with that, we'll see you in the next video. And remember, the struggle continues. Take care, guys.